I hope you sense his presence. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" You can imagine the disciples, like, why is Jesus asking us this question? Who do men say that I am? What's the word on the street? Well, some say that you're John the Baptist or Elijah, and others Jeremiah, one of the prophets. And then he looked at them, his disciples, and he said, "Who do you say that I am?" You see, whoever you say he is unlocks who he is in your life. So he's asking his own disciples, "Hey, what's the word on the street? Who do men say that I am?" Well, some say you're Elijah, Jeremiah, one of the prophets. He said, but here's the real question: who do you say that I am? I love Peter because Peter broke out and he said this: "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. I say you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ. You are my Lord." It's right there in the scripture. That's what he said. In other words, he didn't just go, "Well, you know, you're Jesus." I mean, I'm from Texas, and this is a true story. That doesn't mean the other things I will say today aren't true, but this is a true story. And I was in a Mexican restaurant, Tex-Mex restaurant, and the waiter came up and said, "Hello, I'm Jesus." And I went, "Jesus?" He said, "Yes, that is my name." So Sheila and I were talking about it, we were laughing, and all of a sudden about 2 tables over, I see another waiter, and he came up, he said, "Hello, my name is Jesus." I thought, there are 2 Jesuses here. This is amazing. So when Jesus said, "Who do you say that I am?" you notice Peter didn't say, "You're Jesus." Because there were a lot of people named Jesus. He said, you are, say it, you're not just another Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I love what Jesus said. He said, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And also I say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." On this rock of what? On this rock of revelation of who I am. "I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." I came to you for a few minutes today to talk to you about being an unstoppable force. And you know, it's one thing for people to give a message and to preach a message, and the Word of God is anointed, and He uses simple people. He uses every one of us just to be His hands extended. Yesterday, my wife, I didn't know if you noticed, but my fingernails look special. Because yesterday my wife said, "Hey, I'd like to get was it a pedicure? Manicure and a pedicure." I do not know these words very well. She said, "I'd like to get a pedicure and a manicure. Would you like to do it with me?" I go, "Well, baby, you know I'm good. I'm okay." She says, "Why don't you just do it?" I go, "Okay." So I'm in there. They're sawing on my hands, sawing on my toes. I'm just like going with it. I mean, she was sitting right next to me. They're doing some kind of sandpaper on my feet. I'm like, is this supposed to feel good? Like, am I supposed to relax? Is this going to be? So they put me in hot wax. They did all kind of and then after the hot wax, put me inside some kind of heater thing. And I'm thinking in my mind, what in the world, ladies and gentlemen, what in the world is this process? And so anyway, I endured it. I walked out of there, and my hands were glowing, and my fingernails were pretty, and my toes felt hurting. But I walked out of there, and they weren't quite finished with her yet because she takes a little more time than I do on such things. I don't know why, but it just took longer for her. Baby, I don't know if you noticed that. I got size 14, 15 feet, big old hands. They were taking a long time on your little hands and your little feet. But anyway, I sit down and I noticed a woman in a wheelchair getting her fingernails done. And her daughter. And as she reached for her wallet, I said, hey, would you let me take care of your, whatever you did? Because I didn't know what she did, you know, because there's all kind of things. Like there's different levels I learned. Like there's, so she looked at me and she was a little bit shocked. She said, well, I don't know whether to cry or scream or yell or, she goes, this has been such a horrible day for me. She said, my daughter had a car wreck this morning. And I said, well, you know what? God brought me into this place. And I'm thinking, not just to get my nails done, but he brought me into this place to see a little African-American lady in a wheelchair having a very hard day. Probably going in there just to take some time for herself to say, you know what, if you'll let me do that. And I said, I want to take care of your daughter too. And she just was, I said, I also want to tell you about Relentless Church. Because we were here, you know, getting this done. And I said, and so she might be here, she might be watching. And I want to say to you, April, just like I want to say to everybody here, everywhere we go, we have a chance just to be Jesus' hands extended. Doesn't matter if it's in the nail salon where I never go. Doesn't matter the color of somebody's skin. Doesn't matter the state of their life. Doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. When you're in the room, atmospheres change because of who he is. And I share that with you, not to pat myself on the back and let y'all know I did something good for somebody. But I share that with you because I want you to understand what an unstoppable spirit looks like. Number one, you got to know who God is. When Jesus was saying, who do men say that I am? Well, some say you're Jeremiah, Elijah, one of the prophets. But who do you say that I am? You are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God. That's who you are. And Jesus said, Peter, because that's your revelation, understand this. The gates of hell will never be able to stop you. You see, when you know him, not just as Jesus, when you know him, and again, I don't want to minimize, don't let me minimize anything here. When you know him as not just somebody you have come to worship and you come into his presence and you guys have some of the greatest worship like in the world, literally, for real. And one of the greatest men of God in the world. And you come into his house. This is God's house. And you come into his house and you gather together. You got to know who God is for you. That it's not your mama's God. It's not somebody else's God. It's like, who is he to you? I'll tell you who he is to me. He is the Christ. He is Jesus, the Christ. You see, the Christ part is what gives power to the name of Jesus. And when I understand you are the Christ. In other words, you're the one that makes the impossible possible. You're the one that brings your super into my natural. You are not just a man. You aren't just a religious leader, but you are the central figure in history. You are the axis on which the whole Word of God turns. And so when I make Jesus the Christ, guess what? I become an unstoppable force because greater is he that's in me than he that's in this world. So you got to know who God is. You got to know who God is. I don't have a lot of time today, but I want to tell you this. I've grown up in church, and I remember one time, about the time I was 14. I've always been a little bit taller. I know I may not look that tall up here, but and it's all relative, right? But 6'6", I was already just big and just, I don't even know the word, gangly or just size 14 shoe by the time I was 14, and felt like I was following my feet out the door everywhere I went. I felt like my feet were so huge. I was trying to find shoes. I know some of y'all never thought about this, but trying to find shoes to make my feet look smaller because they were so big. And I remember being in church one day, and I decided I'm gonna lift my hands to Jesus. So I did. And here I was at 14. Now I lift my hands like this. A little lady came to me after the service and she said, I saw you lift your hands. I went, that's exactly what I didn't want. I finally got up the courage to lift my hands. I saw you lifting up your hands. She says, I just want to tell you how to do it. I said, okay. She said, when you praise, your palms are outward. When you worship, your palms are inward. I thought, really? I was getting the courage just to lift up my hands like alligator arms. But when you praise, it's outward. When you worship, it's inward. I said, yes, ma'am. So the next Sunday, I thought, well, I didn't think anybody was watching me, but I guess everybody is, and I do want to worship the Lord. So I did this. I went. Thought I'm going to praise him, and I'm going to. So I just want to tell the worship team that. I want y'all to get that. This is praise. This is worship. You see, some people think they know God because they think they know how to worship. I know a little bit of karate, y'all. I can make the sounds and everything. Woo! Woo! You can have the form. See, what's the thing with the kata in martial arts? Anybody ever study martial arts? Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. What's the deal with the kata? The kata is, this is a down block. So you come, that's a down block, and you're loading this arm right here, because once you block it, bam! Anyway, sometimes we come into a church, and we got the form down. We think we're blocking, the enemy, and we're lifting our hands. And God's saying, I just want your heart. I just want you. I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else, Jesus. Nothing else will do. I just want you. Now let me tell you a little secret. Let me tell you a secret. We can sing that, but I want you to hear God singing that to you. I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else will do. Don't just bring me your mess. Don't just bring me your problems. Don't just bring me your concerns, but do all that. But I just want you to remember, I just want you. I just want you. And then I'll take care of your mess. I'll take care of your problems. I'll take care of the rest. Because see, my children, I just want you. I just want you. I just want you. I just want you. Nothing else, nothing else, nothing else. Nothing else will do. I just want you. Just know that I'm your God and I love you. 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 Nothing else will do. Hear God say, I just want you. He wants you. If you're going to be unstoppable, you have to know who God is. Go ahead and be seated. You have to know who God is. We have 3 children. Their names are Eenie, Meenie, and Miney because she said no mo. It's true. We would always tell our children that. My son was about 6. He said, Dad, I want to mow. I said, no, Eenie, Meenie, Miney, there is no mow. We're driving along, remember that, Sheila? He goes, I want to mow, Dad. I said, no, we'll have no mow. My middle daughter, who Pastor John knows very well, she's very prophetic. I traveled 40 plus weeks a year with a group called the Power Team, and then I had my own team called Strike Force. We broke handcuffs, bent steel bars, broke concrete, spoke in schools all over America. I would travel so much while trying to prioritize my family, and even bought a travel bus and just to be with my family. But there were some times when I'd be gone from Saturday till Thursday, and I remember coming in one Thursday, I was trying to be as quiet as I could, and I slipped in. It was early in the morning. I slipped in. All of a sudden, I hear these footprints running, and around the corner comes Keela, and she went, oh. And she ran. And as she was running towards me, I was reaching out to her. Before she got to me, she dropped on her knees, kissed my feet, lifted up her hands and said, welcome home, my prince. I was so shocked. I said, baby. So I had 2 thoughts. Number 1, I thought, who taught her this? And then, Pastor John, I thought, her mother needs to learn this. This was an amazing greeting. Some of y'all know, the only person that greets you happily when you come home is your dog. They come running. Everybody else goes, hey, I'm home. I know. Anyway. So I go, Keela, come here, baby. I hugged her. I said, that was so sweet. I said, I want you to go get your mother, and I want you to do the same thing. She didn't know what I was doing. She goes, okay. She comes running back in her room. She goes, Mom, are you watching? Now, I didn't even tell her to show her mom. She goes, kisses my feet, welcome home, my prince. Puts her hand over her heart and said, I'm so happy you're home. I looked at my wife and I said, where did she learn this? She goes, I don't know. And I said, well, I think this is a proper greeting. Little Precious, that's what I call her, walked over to me, kissed me on the cheek, said, well, I'm so glad you're home. Would you like some breakfast? And she's never done this, by the way. She never followed that example. But my Keela, still to this day, she's 30, she'll still do it. When I come into her presence, she'll run to me, drop on her knees, kiss my feet, welcome home, my prince. So when she's about 11, she kept doing it every time I'd come home. That was her. I said, Keela, why are you doing this? She stood up, she goes, I don't know how girls do that, but it's some kind of notch. It makes holding a baby easy that men don't have, but whatever that is. She goes, what do you mean, why am I doing that? You're my daddy. Some of y'all are visiting today, and you see all these people here going, God, we worship you. We magnify you. And you're thinking, what are they doing? Can I tell you, I've shared the platform, with the exception of President Obama, I've shared the platform with every former president. And I'll never forget the first time particularly that I was in a green room and Bill Clinton walked in. First of all, his Secret Service walked in, checked the room out. It was just me. I'd already been vetted. We were speaking at an event. And in comes the President of the United States. And I'm telling you, I didn't just sit there. Like I didn't go, hey, Bill. What's up, man? We're speaking today. It's going to be awesome. When the President of the United States walked in, it doesn't matter what your politics are. you just stand up. Like my mom didn't even teach me this, but it's just an honor. Sometimes we come into God's presence and we forget who he is. But we come to these weekend services. Now listen, everybody's watching online. I know y'all got 100,000 plus people that watch online, and it's wonderful. But there's something about being in the room in his presence. And I love that you all watch around the world, but if you're anywhere around here, you need to be in the room. Why? Because we gather together in his name, and if any 2 or 3 of you are gathered together in his name, nothing will be impossible. That's why it's important to come into his house and gather together. You got to know who he is. But here's the second thing. If you're going to be unstoppable, you got to know who you are. Listen very carefully. My father was a Dallas policeman. I grew up in a cop's home. My father was the first man up at the Texas Book Depository. He found Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle. He found his chicken box. He was the first man on the scene. He was the original CSI guy, crime scene investigator for the Dallas Police Department. So I grew up in this home, and he was in forensics, which became known as fingerprinting. And I remember one day I'm sitting in church, and the pastor said, look at your hand. And he said, you have a fingerprint nobody else has. And I thought, man, I've heard that my whole life. Because my dad would walk in with my brother and I, and he'd go, who did it? And in my family, he wouldn't go, not me, because the powder would come out. Like, who did it? I did, okay, it was me. Because I'm telling you, he'd pull out the powder, get ready to take somebody's fingerprint. And so that's how I grew up. If we got in trouble, this is true. If we got in trouble, part of the way we were disciplined is we went to jail. It made me never want to go to jail. My dad said, oh, y'all aren't working it out between you, are you? No, we're not. Let's go to jail. My dad would lock my brother and I in a jail cell in the Dallas County Jail. He said, when y'all get it figured out, you can get out. Because people that end up behind these bars couldn't figure it out. And that's why they get behind the bars. So I've been in jail, y'all, many times. And my brother and I figured out, like my dad would lock us down. We go, hey, we did it done. He goes, no, I'm gonna just wait a little while with all the other people that were in there. We're boys. My dad just leave us in jail until we figured it out. But anyway, my dad, I grew up, so when I was in church, the pastor said, look at your hand. And I was very young. He said, look at your hand, you have a fingerprint nobody else has. And the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me for the first time. Here's what he said, to leave an imprint that nobody else can leave. Everybody look at your hand. Everybody look at your hand right now. Do you know at the end of your fingertip is a fingerprint that nobody in history's ever had, nobody will ever have? Now look up here at me. Why would God give you that fingerprint? Until about 10 years ago, the only way forensic science knew to use your fingerprint was against you. Technology caught up, and now you can open the world with your fingerprint. Now your eye print. But the fact is, you have a fingerprint nobody else has to leave an imprint that nobody else can leave on people's lives. You see, if you're going to be unstoppable, you have to know what it is that you bring. So back to my dad. Listen to this. My dad would take me to school in his squad car. Now, he didn't take me to school every day, but every day he took me to school in his squad car. This happened. What I'm about to tell you happened every time he took me to school. My dad was stoic. He didn't talk. He was a cop. He drove slow. I would go, Dad, can we go the speed limit? He'd go, why, are you in a hurry? I said, he was checking things out all the whole time. I said, what are you looking at? What are you looking? He goes, this is my job. He didn't talk, didn't say I love you, nothing. He was there. And I would slide right over next to him in the squad car. And by the time I was 11, I was just about as big as my dad. He's about 5'9". And I'd slide right over next to him. I'd put my arm around him. I'd lay my head on his shoulder. He'd have both hands on the wheel, just looking straight ahead. Every time he took me to school, he'd drive me up in front of the school, and he'd look straight ahead. He'd say, have a good day, Keith. And I'd look at him right in his ear. I'd say, Dad, I love you. And Pastor Johnny couldn't say it. So at 11, here's what started to happen. I'd say, repeat this after me. Say, I, this happened every time. He'd go, I love you. Still looking straight ahead. And then I would take his face and turn it towards me, and his eyes would be going like this. I go, look at me, Dad. He would look at me, and I would say, I'm this little kid. I'm saying, I love you. And I would kiss him right on the lips. Every time he'd shake his head, he'd go, okay. Leave. You go to school. Go to school, that's enough. My mother used to give me the business, y'all. She'd say, your father is a Dallas policeman. When you're in his squad car and you're riding right over next to him, your arms around him, it just doesn't look right. She goes, you kiss all over him. It makes him uncomfortable, Keith. And one day I broke and I started crying. I said, Mom, you know how Dad didn't have a dad? She goes, yeah. I said, this is what God spoke to me. God spoke to me to love him in a way that his dad never loved him. So my mother starts crying. She goes, yes, that's what he needs. I go, I know. I go, Mom, let me be me. Let me love my dad. Let me express to him, even if he doesn't listen. I said, even if he doesn't express back. I didn't know. It was 4 years later when I got the revelation of this fingerprint that I'm sharing with you today. I didn't know that I had a fingerprint nobody else had. To leave an imprint, I can touch this pulpit and my fingerprints are on this pulpit. And it doesn't matter what my dad did or didn't do, whether he was there or whether he wasn't there. I have a fingerprint to leave an imprint that nobody else can leave. So, I don't have time to tell you the story, but my dad was 67. He had a major heart attack. And long story short, that's when he came to Christ. Because I stayed by his side 24/7 in the intensive heart transplant care unit in Baylor Hospital. And he had a revelation from God, and he spent the next 20 years of his life celebrating the goodness of God. But I grew up with a dad, listen to me, but without a dad and being a dad to my dad. So here's some of these pictures of my dad and I. This is right before he passed away. I took him to my house in Florida. Next picture. This is us on the beach. I'm like his gorilla. And then, now I want to leave that picture up there for a minute because I know that some of you, this grosses you out. But I want you to understand something about that picture right there. My father finally settled in his heart this was going to happen. Now listen, this is 3 months before he passed away. This is outside our church. We just got through with our service, and I grabbed him like I always do, and I want you to notice where his hands are. Now you can't see it, but here's what began to happen with my dad and I. My dad, from the time I was 11, he would approach me this way. When he would see me coming, he'd put his head down. He'd put his hands behind his back like this, and he would walk towards me, and he knew what was coming. And by the time I would get to him, especially as I grew up and got bigger than him, he would go like this. And he would just wait. But I'm gonna tell you something, I got to love my dad in a way his dad never loved him. And I decided it wasn't gonna be what my dad did, I was gonna be me, and my mom gave me permission to do it. So that's what I did to his dying day. You know why? Because if you're gonna be unstoppable, you have to know who God is, and you have to know who you are and what fingerprint you have to leave an imprint that only you can leave. And not let what somebody is not determine who you are. Here's the last thing. The last thing is that if you're gonna be unstoppable, and again, this is gonna bring it all together for you, you have to know what you're put on the earth to do. What are you put on the earth to do? I was a small child, and my mom had left our house to go to a choir banquet, and she took her dress out of a plastic bag, laundry bag, dry cleaning bag, laid it on the bed, She laid me in a playpen next to the bed, not thinking anything about it, put me down for a nap. She went to her choir banquet, and my mamaw, who was my grandmother, came over to take care of me and my brother. And my mom said, hey, don't worry about Keith. I put him down for a nap, check on him in about 45 minutes to an hour. And she goes, okay. About 30 minutes later, my mom had left. My brother walks into the kitchen. He was young, about 3 years old, and says, Mamaw, Keith's all blue. Well, she didn't think anything about it. She just kind of ignored him. Long story short, here's what happened. She walked into the room. When she checked on me, she looked down, and she couldn't even tell what had happened, but this plastic bag had engulfed me, and I had suffocated to death. There was blood coming from my nose, my mouth, and my ears, and to make a long story short, when she picked me up, she took the plastic bag off of me, I was bleeding out. Every orifice that I had was bleeding out. I was not breathing. I was already blue. I was gone. She called the emergency number, and in Dallas, Texas in 1961, there wasn't an emergency center on every corner. The hospital, Methodist Hospital, was about 30 minutes away. They sent an ambulance. My mama went out on the corner, and she stood and she prayed. And as she prayed on this corner, in my lifeless body, I bled out all over. I'd suffocated to death. 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes passed, and at about the 30-minute mark, a fire truck comes rushing down our street, and the fire captain by the name of E.R. Kaufman jumped out of the fire truck, and he said, I'm so sorry, the ambulance had a flat tire. We picked up the call. How long has he been like this? My mama said, I don't know. It's been at least 30 minutes. I've been standing out here. They said, ma'am, we'll do what we can, but we think he's gone. They tried mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. They tried oxygen. They tried everything. It didn't work. They pronounced me dead on the scene, pulled a sheet over me, and it was at that point that my born-again, spirit-filled mama prayed a prayer something like this. God, you've given him life. And no matter what's happening right now, the same power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead can raise him up. And she began to pray. She began to speak in tongues. The firemen were just shaking their head until the sheet blew off of me and my eyes popped open, and my mama was doing a little bit of this right here. She's just like, God. Now listen very carefully, because I want to end on this. Listen, I want you to see this picture. This would be a cute little story, except that it's recorded on the front page of the Dallas Morning News. Now listen. This is Thanksgiving Day, 1961, a Thanksgiving blessing. In case you don't have 2010 vision, let me read it for you. Young Keith Allen Kraft will be a real-life Thanksgiving blessing this year to his parents, Mr. and Miss James M. Kraft, his grandmother, Miss Fred Ferguson, and his brother, Bruce Kraft. The boy suffocated, but was brought back to life earlier this year. Now, let me just tell you something. You can look at that picture. That's me. That's my dad, Jimmy the cop, who passed away 4 years ago. That's my beautiful mother that's still alive. That's my brother. Now, I want you to notice my brother for a second, because in this picture, I want you to see what he's doing. Now, to you, that doesn't mean anything. I know what this means, because I grew up with him. This means it didn't work. I don't know who put the plastic bag over me, but let me pause. Everybody listen to me, because I'm about to sniper you right in your heart. It don't matter what your brother did. It doesn't matter what your dad did or didn't do. It doesn't matter what happened to them. You know why? Because it doesn't matter. Watch this. God is God. I'm front and center, regardless if he did the plastic bag or not. But let me say one last thing. I'm out of time. That lady in the back, rewind 5 years, 1955 and a half. She found out she was going to have breast cancer, or she found out she had cancer, breast cancer. 1955 was a death sentence. Just stay standing, I'm through. In 1955, they said, you got breast cancer, we have to remove your breast. My grandfather, who I never knew, found out about it and told her to her face, that means you're not a woman anymore. If they remove your breast, that means you're not a woman anymore. And left with her then best friend. When she walked out on that corner with my lifeless body, here's what she didn't do. Here's what she didn't do. God, it's not the cancer. You know, it's not the breast cancer. It's not the fact that my breasts are gone. It's my broken heart. You know, I raised 4 kids with that man. And he left with my friend. That's what she didn't do. She walked out of that corner and she said, God, it doesn't matter what it looks like. And you know what? It's not about my cancer at this point. It's not about my broken heart at this point. It's about you, God. And you have the power. You see, this message that I'm telling you is not just a cute little sermon. Here's what I want to say to you. I bring a word from God for you. If this was the last time I got to speak, because it is the first time, it's the first time after my heart attack. It's the first time that God would say, what would you tell people? What would you tell people if I gave you another chance? What would you tell people? I would tell them, you got to know who God is for you. You got to know who you are and how important you are and how important your fingerprint is and the imprint that only you can leave. What would I tell you if God gave me one more chance and if this is the last time? If this is the last time, it's certainly the first time. But if it's the last time I get to speak, if it's the last time I get to proclaim something, what would I tell you? You got to know what God put you on the earth to do. And don't you let the divorce stop you. And don't you let the cancer stop you. And don't you let the dad that wasn't there stop you. Don't you let what people said stop you. Don't you let the criticism stop you. Don't you let the pain. Don't you let the brokenness. Don't you let anything stop you. And guess what? It's not going to be over till he says it's over. And the devil can do whatever he can try to do to take you out. He can try to snuff your life out. He can try to suffocate you. He can try to make your heart quit. And I'm just here to tell you, I'm here to declare to you and to speak over this church and to speak over your pastor that there is an unstoppable spirit that's coming into this house and coming into this church and coming into your life. And that's my assignment today. My assignment today is to prophesy to you that from this day forward, Relentless Church, because of your relentless spirit, you cannot be stopped. You cannot be stopped. You cannot be stopped. I'm through. But just lift up your hands one more time. Jesus, you are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God. Thank you for your people. Thank you for the privilege of life. Lift up every head. Lift up every heart. God, let us be focused on you. And when the enemy comes in, everybody look up here at me. This is misquoted all the time. When the enemy comes in like a flood. No, that's not it. When the enemy comes in like a flood, God raises a standard against him. When the enemy comes in and says it's over, when the enemy comes in and says you got cancer, when the enemy comes in and says it's the end, it's not over till he says it's over. And I came to tell you, Relentless Church, you cannot be stopped in the name of Jesus.
If you're here, you've never given your life to Jesus. If you're here, you've never given your life to Jesus, or you want to be a member of Relentless Church, come to the front of this church right now. Come to this altar right now.